Hello, my name is Larry Tannenbaum, and I'm very glad to be able to share this talk on artificial intelligence and imaging of the spine over the next 20 minutes or so. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about what is AI, some of the issues and controversies in that space, and then we'll spend the rest of our time talking about impact in the spine imaging sphere. What is AI? Well, basically, it's a branch of computer science that allows machines to do things that are typically associated with human intelligence, like reasoning, learning, and self-improvement. AI is all around us in everything we do, from crowdsourced navigation information through ads that show up every time I open a browser that show the last place that I looked, to actually, having the destination that I'm heading show up every time I end up in the cities that I visit on Uber, which is pretty remarkable. As a matter of fact, this year's editorial board, is actually next year's editorial board, a bunch of robots, all trained, by deep learning algorithms. AI is doing pretty well. As you can see, machine learning is doing pretty well in terms of image recognition. It is already exceeding human performance. And in terms of speech recognition, it is already exceeding human performance. Pretty remarkable stuff. But it still has a long way to go. We've all seen these robots, but the robots tend to fall when things are very difficult, right? Driverless cars really do need intervention or accidents will happen. Even though it can read through language processing, the understanding remains at the 6th grade reading level, and it is not very sophisticated. As a matter of fact, some of the things that are very easy for us to appreciate are very difficult for computers to handle, such as complex visual scenes. You look at this, you see a rock, you see a tree, you see land. I think the computers can handle this as well, but you can sense there's something wrong here. And you might realize that this is a rock in water with reflection, way before, if ever, the computer gets there. In general, for AI, we know that hard problems are easy and easy problems are hard. Walking across a room, picking up a pencil, recognizing your mom, that's easy for us, hard for them. Whereas looking through, jillions of data points to pick up patterns, which we can't do, is very, very easy for machine learning and AI to do. So it's complicated. So where are we? Well, in late 2016, Geoffrey Hinton, who was the godfather of neural networks, which is essentially the technology beyond all deep learning, announced in a very well publicized way that it's quite obvious we should start training radiologists. They said radiologists are like the coyote who's chasing the roadrunner and has run off the cliff but hasn't looked down and noticed there's no ground under his feet. In 2018, however, Sir Geoffrey actually backed off that proclamation quite a bit when he saw the real limitations of what deep learning can do, when he got a much better understanding of what a radiologist's role is. He backed off that comment and went to something akin to, well, maybe I overstated the case. You can see where we are with deep learning, where this is sort of the Gartner hype curve, and you can see that things like deep learning of image interpretation is already starting its way well down towards the trough of disillusionment, whereas things like deep learning for speech and deep learning for text is moving up the hype curve. And notice that deep understanding, the ability to do what a human does, or even a child does, is decades away if computers can ever get there. So we really have got quite a ways to go before these things replace humans in the day-to-day setting. There are some well-known challenges to deep learning algorithms, machine learning algorithms. They tend to be very brittle. They often fail in the wild when they do very well against a population selected out of the test set, but they're very sensitive to adversarial perturbations, either natural or implanted, that will throw them off. When you take data from New Jersey, it doesn't match up to data, it doesn't perform as well when you take it to Maryland. Again, it is very, very highly sensitive to things it hasn't seen before, because it really can only make sense of things it has seen before. Now, back in 2017, when I first, did my first talk in this space, things were happening very quickly, and apparently, and radiologists were going to be gone. But as you can see, over the last almost 3 years, you know, progress has been relatively slow. But as I said, we always overestimate what's going to occur quickly. But as soon as we turn around, you're going to find that this technology is all around us. This is just a sampling of the companies that are active in the imaging space right now. Everything from image reconstruction through automatic scanning to assisted reading. All these companies are active with a variety of prototypes and actual products that have gotten CE approval and FDA clearance. This is a wonderful slide from Hugh Harvey, which shows the potential applications of artificial intelligence in radiology, everything from clinical decision support, which in this case means utilization management, through communicating results. You can see applications in segmentation, which we'll talk about here, in terms of diagnostic decision making, which we'll talk about here. And we'll even talk about things like dose reduction, scan time reduction, and automated acquisition, all focusing on applications in the spine. So the things we're going to talk about are right here: automated scan acquisition, CT and MR image reconstruction with machine learning and deep learning techniques. We're going to briefly touch on urgent finding triage, and we'll talk about segmentation and perhaps even computer-assisted diagnosis. So one of the tools that is now fairly ubiquitous, well, I wouldn't say fairly ubiquitous, I'd say virtually all except for one manufacturer, well, I guess that's close to fairly ubiquitous, is a technique using deep learning, machine learning to do automated spine scanning, adjusting the scan planes, adjusting the obliquity, labeling the levels, mirroring the disc spaces, all things that improve the quality of what we end up with interpreting on our PACS. This is actually the Siemens dot interface, and you can see it's already labeled the vertebral bodies. It knows exactly what it's doing. If you were doing slices in this direction on a CT scanner, it would adjust to the actual angle of the disc space for each individual reconstructed slice. They have shown, the Siemens folks have, that they can get better workflow with these tools: 74 fewer scans repositioned, 26% less user interaction. In our institution, we actually had the same scanner, the same protocols on two scanners in the New York City area. One had the automatic scan engine, which is the Siemens dot in this particular case, and one didn't. You see the one with the red arrow, that's the one that had the dot engine. And you can see statistically, after 100 or so cases of each, the exam lasted, the patient was on the table several minutes less. So forget the quality improvement of the exam, positioning consistency and the like. The exam is done faster because it's more efficient, perhaps fewer retakes. Things like improving communication through automatic spine fusion is also a very powerful adjunct to what we can do in terms of conveying information, or even reading the exam. I remember reading these. I would have the full spine on one PACS monitor, and then the zoomed in segmented spine on the other monitor, and it just kept me from constantly recounting. Is it 11-12 or 10-11? 11-12, 10-11. Well, I had the holistic view on the left, and I had the zoomed in view on the right, and that just helped me be more efficient and more consistent, perhaps more accurate in my determination. Here you can actually see what the CT application looks like on a Siemens scanner, and I know there are several manufacturers that have this right now as well. This is the GE interface, where if you take it offline, it will actually take your data and reconstruct it parallel to the individual disc spaces. It can be, the obliquity is automatically adjusted in both planes. Here you can actually see some Siemens data. This is a fairly scoliotic patient. You see the automatic labeling by the tool, but look at how consistent the axial images are off of this really sigmoid-shaped spine. Here you see another demonstration. This is actually a live demo of the interface. The red lines are set by the machine. The operator says this is acceptable, none need to be adjusted, and then we just simply click a button, and then you actually will see the images coming out virtually perfectly positioned. And again, any overt failures can be adjusted before the recon is started. Actually after as well, but you wouldn't want to do it after when you can before. Notice on the left-hand side, you see we're staying parallel to the disc space, and it's adjusting in both planes. Here again, you can see the actual way the slices were set up on this particular patient that gave you the results. And we just use this routine as a routine algorithm. This is just what comes out. We have the isotropic data, which is obtained isotropically, orthogonally, but the reconstructions just come out parallel to the disk space. I don't think there's any question that, in this case, as metastatic disease, that we will do a better job assessing the spinal canal if we think of it the same way that the surgeons think of it. And as a matter of fact, when I was at Sinai, our fellows did a paper on this, and we called it automated adaptive multiplane multi-angle oblique, as opposed to what Siemens calls it, fast spine. And here you can see two cervical spine images at the same level, one with the orthogonal acquisition in light gray, and one with the fast spine, the automated oblique in white on the left-hand side, and the substantially different depiction of the spinal canal when you have that obliquity being adjusted by the computer. Again, quality as well as speed of interpretation. There are some other things that come along with these bone reading tools. Again, popping into one of these post-processing algorithms, all your spine labeling is there, and even your rib labeling is there. So if you've ever looked for rib fractures on a trauma study, you know how difficult it is. Is that T9 or T8? T9 or T8 drives you crazy, as well as the ability to, even on an oncology case, to see metastases. This came from a routine chest CT patient with known metastatic disease. None of the rib lesions were described as having lytic mets, but you can see very easily from these automatically created rib views, which actually you can rotate around, that there is clearly an expansile lesion with endosteal scalloping here, several others along, none of which were called on the routine image because of difficulty in interpreting those curved structures. Again, you get also these oblique sagittals, kind of like you do on a dentist scan, where here you can see that we've lost some of our cortical thickness and the medullary space is low density. All right, what else can we talk about here? Let's talk about compressed sensing. As you know, with parallel imaging, we do less sampling and reconstruct the image. Essentially, compressed sensing is a form of machine learning. We do creative pseudo-randomized vast undersampling and use tools like machine learning to recreate a quality image. As you can see from these scan times, based on our actual scan times, we were able to achieve significant savings, even though we felt that our scan times were pretty streamlined before. So we've gone from 14 minutes of diagnostic scanning down to 10, maintaining the same quality and spatial resolution. Again, getting savings in the spine of 30 to 50%. Here you see typical compressed sense T1, T2, and STIR, very reasonable quality, standard clinical resolution, but roughly 30% faster for this thoracic spine. As you might imagine, when you have acceleration tools, and any of the ones we talk about today can be applied in a variety of different ways. You can take your standard exam, make it faster. You can improve the quality of your standard exam by reducing its noise, or you can raise the spatial resolution and maintain the noise and make the exam better. All opportunities to leverage the power of compressed sensing here, going from a 6-minute protocol to a 7.5-minute protocol to a 9.5-minute protocol, and anywhere else your imagination will take you. Here you can see a with and without simulated study, same patient done both ways. The routine clinical exam, standard of care on the top, the 30% accelerated compressed sensing scan on the bottom, going from 19 minutes of scanning, which really won't fit in a 20-minute slot, to 13 minutes of scanning with and without, which could be accomplished in an efficient facility with only 20-minute exam slotting. Again, regardless of the throughput benefits, anytime you reduce the scan time by 30%, it will be perceived by the patient as a better experience. Same thing in the lumbar spine. You can go faster, you can do better quality, or you can do higher spatial resolution. Here you can see where we sit at our institutions with 11 minutes and 35 seconds of diagnostic scanning, giving us this type of quality for a 5-sequence lumbar spine. You can take a sacrum, which can turn into a very lengthy exam, and reduce that scan time in half. Here you see the same patient done both ways, 20 minutes on the top, 10 minutes on the bottom. I know the images are small, but they, to the reader, they were almost imperceptible. All right, so we talked about compressed sensing. Let's talk about conventional noise reduction. Now, as you may know, there are noise reducing tools on every machine, and these are not coarse filters. These are tools that reduce noise, sometimes even can sense noise and reduce it separately from any of the anatomy, and generally preserve the spatial resolution. You can see the image on the left is noisy. The image on the right is a little glossier, but maintains all of the edge information, all of the spatial resolution. These tools are there, and I wholeheartedly encourage you to use them. We use them throughout our network to get a roughly 20% boost in signal to noise or speed. But there are new tools that are available that go beyond conventional noise reduction. And one is this commercial product by Medic Vision, which is a machine learning assisted form of iterative reconstruction. We know iterative reconstruction from CT. This is an MR version. With CT, we can use 30, 40, 50% lower dose. With MR, we can get so much faster. And this is an abstract that we presented at several meetings, looking at impact of their algorithm on brain and spine scan times. Here you can see an example of a lumbar spine standard of care on the left and a 44% time reduction on the right with a very respectable image quality. Here's another one, 249 on the left, 1 minute 30 on the right, 47% time reduction. Here's a T1, 1 minute on the right, 47% faster on the left, 47% faster on the right. Same thing here, 36% faster on the right. How did they do? The blinded reads gave a non-inferiority measure with statistical significance to the accelerated process scans when compared to the standard of care exams. We had the same effect on cervical spine exams, where the processed accelerated exams were non-inferior to the standard of care exams, giving you roughly 30% more speed. So brain, cervical, and lumbar, in this case, we didn't show you the brain, all essentially non-inferior. All right, so what else can we talk about in this space? Well, we know iterative reconstruction from CT. Most folks would say that this took some accommodation. The images didn't look quite like we expected. And let's investigate a little bit about why that is. When I tell you about these three products that are now clinically available, at least the first two are FDA cleared, True Fidelity from GE and ACE from Canon, deep learning based CT versions of image reconstruction that go well beyond where we are with traditional iterative reconstruction techniques. We know what iterative reconstruction did for us, right? It allows us to use doses that are so low that conventional imaging, as here on the left, isn't satisfactory. But with this model-based iterative reconstruction, you notice we restore normal noise levels and even enhance the spatial resolution a bit. Problem is when you use an iterative reconstruction technique, you do lose a little bit of resolution. And you do lose a little bit of the image texture that you love. Take a look at this top row. You got a filtered back projection at a dose of 80 on the right, CTDI of 80. The noise level is standard deviation of 15. So this is our gold standard. High dose, filtered back, low noise level. If we take that same filtered back projection and reduce the dose by 90%, notice the noise level goes to 32. That's how you measure noise. And you can see it in the image. Very low noise, very high noise. Okay, filtered back can't handle the drop in dose. If we take the filtered back projection here and process it with traditional iterative reconstruction, we notice we get an improvement in the noise. It works, right? This stuff works. It's still noisier than the gold standard, and you might accept that, or you might use a little higher dose. Now look at what happens when we take this image and process it with the deep learning algorithm. We maintain the noise level exactly the same, and we get a very, very low, very satisfactory looking image. Let's take a closer look. So it works. That's what we'd say, right? Another thing about iterative reconstruction techniques with traditional techniques is tissues don't behave the same way that they do with iterative reconstruction traditionally than they do with filtered back projection. Notice we have three different materials, bone, acrylic, and I think this is polyacrylate, but I'm not entirely sure. You'll notice that there is overlap of the curves across the spatial frequencies. Notice the divergence of these curves with traditional iterative reconstruction as well as model-based iterative reconstruction. In other words, these tissues will not look the same across frequencies than they do with filtered back projection. If you look in contrast, if you use the deep learning iterative reconstruction, this is GE's True Fidelity here, and compare that to the filtered back projection at 120 kV and 70 kV, notice the doped phantoms look exactly the same. What am I saying? The Hounsfield unit values are preserved. They don't change. And we know with traditional reconstruction, they do change. We also know that people complain about the image texture. You can see that in the noise power spectrum. Yellow is iterative reconstruction. This is an ACER level of 100. The red and blue curves here are actually the filtered back projection, ACER of 0, and the deep learning reconstruction. Notice the complete overlap of noise power spectrum between the deep learning and the no iterative reconstruction, and the major shift in spatial frequency that you get when you use iterative reconstruction. What does that mean? It means the texture of the image changes with traditional iterative reconstruction, but it doesn't with deep learning reconstruction. You can see that here. Notice the image texture is just a little odd with things like ACER, but is not odd. It's essentially uncorrupted with the deep learning algorithm on the right. A good way to demonstrate that is to go to extremes and then subtract the image. Here's our noisy filtered back. Here we filtered the heck out of it with iterative reconstruction, something akin to ACER of 100. And here we process it with a deep learning algorithm, okay? If you subtract this from this, and there's no loss of resolution, you get nothing in the image. So this subtracted from that leaves nothing but noise. That's what you want to leave. You don't want to see structure. Subtracting this from that, you see a lot of structure. What does that mean? We've thrown a lot of structure away with traditional iterative reconstruction, albeit in this case, applied in a very heavy way. So if you take this really noisy, ultra low dose image, something you might do in a pediatric brain when you're looking for craniosynostosis, you can create a very highly diagnostic image using deep learning reconstruction. And if subtracted to, notice there's nothing missing here but the noise. Big advance over where we were beforehand. And again, notice that the resolution doesn't change whether you apply the deep learning reconstruction at the lowest levels or the highest levels or even the medium levels. The images look great and the spatial resolution performance doesn't change. Again, looking at brain imaging, this is a 2.5 millimeter image set with low dose. Notice the typical appearance of filtered back at low doses, a lot of salt and pepper in the brain substance and in the ventricles. When we go to the iterative reconstruction for 2.5, we're straining it a little bit, but you can maybe get a sense that the texture is not what you're used to. And then if you look at the deep learning based iterative reconstruction set, it restores a noise level as well as a texture that we're more familiar with historically than we have been with the traditional iterative reconstruction. This again is an example from GE. This is their standard iterative reconstruction. This is their true fidelity deep learning reconstruction. You can see an image that looks very much like you expect it to look without any of the altered texture that we might see. You can see the same example here. This is true fidelity in the lower row. This is the iterative reconstruction on the top row. And you'll notice we were able to reduce the noise, particularly in these bone algorithm, high resolution reconstruction, as well as the standard or low spatial resolution reconstruction without creating any weirdness to the image quality itself. I mentioned that GE is not the only one with an FDA-approved tool. Canon has their ACE software for CT doing virtually the same thing. I don't have examples from them, but it's an FDA-approved algorithm using deep learning to do the same task. And this is just an example from the Korean company Clary Pi, which does have an FDA clearance doing the same thing. And again, they're showing you that there is very little lost in the image when you do the deep learning on it. All right. That would be exciting enough, but imagine that you could apply the same tools to accelerating your MR acquisitions. Wouldn't that be fun? And that really is a reality now that all three of these companies, both GE with their Air Recon DL, Canon with ACE, and Subtle MR with their vendor agnostic solution, can all do deep learning and essentially accelerate MR acquisitions. Again, I talked to you about noise reduction, and you can see this is the raw image. This is the standard ClaraView on the GE scanner, which we make use of routinely. And this is what deep learning does to the same image data set. Notice the noise is lower. The spatial resolution is not diminished. It's actually probably slightly enhanced. And even the contrast resolution is enhanced by using these tools. As a matter of fact, if you want to get extreme, this is a sub-millimeter 2D fast-band echo image, something that we wouldn't even dream of being able to do in the past. Our noise reduction really gets exhausted. We can't get there from here with conventional noise reduction, but the same data now, it's not a separate scan, the same data with a K-space ported to the reconstruction algorithm gives us this image, which frankly is pretty spectacular. Now imagine how your interpretations might change if you started to view your routine spine imaging with sub-millimeter voxels. There are compromises made in any acquisition that has an asymmetric field of view, like a spine or say a knee. Okay, and we use something called a Fermi filter to get rid of the truncations that you see here. Okay, you see these little lamellations that really aren't real. The Fermi filter does a very nice job of removing those artifacts, but intrinsic to the Fermi filter is a sacrifice of spatial resolution because the outer regions of K-space are tossed away. Imagine if you can train a deep learning algorithm from teaching it the artifact to remove the artifact, and then we could turn the Fermi filter off and get that resolution back for free. That's what you're seeing here. The same acquisition with no Fermi filter, what we would get without it, and what we get with the deep learning algorithm, getting rid of all of the artifact from the truncation in this particular case. You can see the same thing in this particular example. We have turned off the Fermi filter for all of these without deep learning, with deep learning, without deep learning, with deep learning. Notice how it's even gone ahead and raised the spatial resolution. Look how big the chord looks. These truncation artifacts tend to make the chord look small and the resolution look low. Notice how the resolution seems to have increased and the chord even looks larger in these cases. And again, having this ability is free spatial resolution. So we did an abstract on this particular tool, looking at brain and spine imaging at our institutions. We looked at 28 patients, 93 image set pairs, and the K-space data was sent both to the routine reconstruction engine as well as the deep learning reconstruction engine. In this particular case, tuned to 75%. Notice the image on the left and the image on the right are the same data. It's the same scan, just a different reconstruction, this one based on deep learning. It looks like a completely different scanner to me. Again, notice we're retaining spatial resolution. We've improved signal to noise. Notice all of this noise in here, all these little white dots, all of this salt and pepper. That's not real. I mean, radiologists like to see that. Maybe it feels like resolution, but it's fake information. It's textured noise. Again, notice how much better we see the corticoquina nerve roots here. Again, look at this comparison right here. If you can see it on the screen, it just looks like it's double the spatial resolution perception-wise. This is a nice scan, a little noisy, and this is what it looks like with deep learning. Again, same data, two different reconstructions. A nice looking scan if you ignore the prevertebral soft tissues. Notice, by the way, how nicely these tissues are preserved, yet the noise is gone. And look at how gorgeous the scan looks once it's processed with deep learning. Again, without conventional reconstruction, a nice looking scan, and deep learning reconstruction, even better. Conventional, deep learning. Taking a closer look, again, conventional and deep learning, same data. Notice how much better you see this either little osteophyte perhaps, this annular fissure here, look at this high intensity zone, looks larger and more robust. The chord itself looks like it's better spatial resolution and bigger. Again, it's the same data, just using these tools to get rid of the truncation artifact, to get rid of the noise, and both intrinsically enhance the spatial resolution as well as avoid the discarding of spatial resolution. Again, a noisy scan turned into a gorgeous scan. The blinded readers, although honestly it's hard to read blind when you see a deep learning reconstruction for all measures: image quality, conspicuity, contrast, resolution, spatial resolution perception, signal to noise perception, and perhaps most importantly, image texture, all statistically superior with a P of 0.05 with the deep learning algorithm compared to the standard of care. Now, it's really exciting to see things like ACE and deep learning recon, but they're only going to go on the new machines. Okay, most of us have a lot of old machines that really would benefit from acceleration and just overall improvement in image quality, and there are products for that as well. This is another commercial product this one from Subtle MR, and we did a trial with them, allowing them to create a fast exam that was only 1/3 as long as the standard exam. And we used their deep learning-based image reconstruction tool to create an image that we hoped would match up well against the standard of care exam. Here you see the typical 6-sequence lumbar spine standard exam on the top, and here you see the accelerated exam processed with their Subtle MR deep learning algorithm on the bottom, 125 to 41, 209 to 127, 201 to 113, 125 to 47, and the like, a faster exam across the board. So we looked at 61 patients, 2 Siemens, 2 GE scanners. Again, vendor agnostic software works on anybody's scanner. You can see the standard of care exam ran about 171 seconds on the average scan, individual scan, not exam. And the accelerated scans ran about 96 seconds as an average. Here's just another example. Standard of care on the top, process imaging on the bottom. Patients sat through both exams during this setting. So here you'd see the experiment. We actually take the standard of care exam here, and we make a fast version here. And essentially, we use the algorithm to train this image to look like this image, which we hope would compare favorably against this image, a little neurogenic lesion here. So again, standard of care, accelerated scan, algorithm turns this image into this image, and hopefully it will compare well against that image. We looked at all the usual things we mentioned beforehand, a couple of additional ones, graded on a Likert scale, and again, standard of care, fast image, hoping the algorithm makes this image look like this image, and it compares well to that image. So we did the typical comparison. There's the fast scan, there's a deep learning fast scan, this is the standard of care exam. How did we do? Well, it turns out that the deep learning scan was better than the standard of care in 2 areas, signal to noise and artifacts, maybe because the scan was shorter, but otherwise non-inferior statistically, no statistical difference in any of the measures. So that's really what you're after, right? The ability to go faster and match the quality of the standard of care exam. It's just another one. Little noisy, fast scan, trained it to look like this scan, and hoped it would prepare, and did in this case, was non-inferior to this scan, except for maybe delivering a little better SNR in a number of cases when blind read. So we've covered that. So basically, 2/3 time reduction, maintaining the image quality. All right, beyond reconstruction, there are other things that are going on in the spine space. As you know, there are tools that can triage urgent findings to the top of your work list, and thanks to AI Doc for loaning me some of the material I'm going to show you here. This is a patient who had head trauma. The initial interpretation of the brain CT was normal. The algorithm bumped it to the top of the pile and pointed to these small hemorrhages, which alerted the radiologist and the treating team that there was something to be concerned about. This particular patient fell off a ladder, was having a total body imaging study. The algorithm looked at the total body CT data and said, hey, you got a little fracture here. This patient had very little concern of fracture, was sent over to the department without a cervical collar. The neuro team identified this cervical fracture, and the patient was put on fracture precautions. Here's just another case, very subtle finding. You can see perhaps these would have the greatest value when your antennas are not up as high for fracture as they would if this was a dedicated cervical spine study. A couple of other findings from the algorithm from AI Doc seen. Let me actually call themselves ADoc, seen here pretty nicely. Now, if you're interested in what's coming next, there are a couple of articles that I came across that look pretty good. Here's one with artificial intelligence and machine learning in spine research from 2018. Here is one from 2019 in AJR, artificial intelligence and musculoskeletal imaging, which had a fair amount of work going into it in the spine. And, what are some other things that we can do in this space? Well, one of the things that we're already, starting to see are tools that will assist us in the interpretation, reporting, and workflow of spine imaging. You may know that lumbar spine imaging is the most common exam done in outpatient centers around the world, roughly 40% of our volume. We all know as neuroimagers that this is a laborious process. to report these exams. Our sensitivity to things like subtle compression fractures are limited. Our ability to quantify spinal stenosis, disc herniation size, identify nerve roots are all relatively limited, and even more important, incredibly inconsistent between readers and relatively inconsistent intra-reader. Imagine a tool like this that could set you up for success, set you up with a standardized grading of all of these lesions, assist in the segmentation so you can appreciate compression fractures, and even identify nerve roots, and even go so far as to pre-populate the report for you, what impact this would have on a common, difficult, challenging exam which suffers from lack of standardization and non-quantification, converting that into something that would be adaptable to data mining, as well as show greater workflow, and particularly, and I think perhaps even better accuracy, but certainly greater standardization. Again, segmentation is actually low-hanging fruit for these AI-based tools. It's one of the easiest things for them to do. And here you actually see an example of segmenting the fat of the paraspinous muscles, as well as the vertebral heights, in this case, even assessing the spondylolisthesis here. Here you see just another example from a paper by Yao, again showing their segmentation, actually several different methods in a competitive setup to see how well they did. There are other papers looking at segmenting vertebral body shape and disc morphology, which may give you some insights beyond the way we read our spine exams. Even things like standardized reporting of the foramina, things that we really struggle with, can be assisted by some of these deep learning tools. Here you can see the foramina are nicely segmented here in this particular paper. And again, just the ability to report these in a standardized way would be a big boost in quality over where we are right now. There are other areas where folks are dreaming, looking at outcome prediction and disability indices, things like clinical decision support in terms of what treatment regimens will work best, as well as assessment of biomechanics. Here you see a stress reaction depicted by a deep learning algorithm. You can see how you might actually standardize grading with some of the other tools that are working their way towards clinical availability, and even do a more scientific and quantitative assessment of scoliosis patients, which will again assist in treatment planning and consistency across the board. There are other folks that are looking into things like fracture detection, metastatic disease, differentiating the etiology of infection, even looking at multiple sclerosis lesions in the cervical cord. And as you know, significant outcome benefits in assessing upper cervical cord lesions in a quantitative fashion. So we've talked about a lot of things in a limited amount of time. We've sort of talked a little bit about what AI is, its strengths and limitations, but we've covered a lot of what is happening in spine acquisition, clinically available, widely available, MR imagery, CT and MR imagery construction, increasingly and broadly available, urgent finding triage, commercially approved, available in a number of circumstances, certainly in stroke and cervical spine fractures. We talked about the innate strength of segmentation, of ML and AI and segmentation, and how that would play in looking at certain things we report every day and things that we couldn't possibly report. And we also talked about the impending availability of CAD-type tools that will streamline our interpretation of common exams. I hope that was fun and illustrative. And what you see here is a centaur, which is a hybrid of man and horse, in this case, meant to indicate hybrid of man and machine, which hopefully will take us beyond where we are today. That really is what we want from AI tools: better efficiency, as well as elevation of human capabilities because of its ability to comb through data in ways that we can't. Thank you for your attention.